And welcome back, everyone, to the Christian Patriot Report. I am your host, Don Gardner, and let's just talk about one of the greatest sins that America has ever committed. And no, I'm not talking about abortion. I'm talking about racism. I'm talking about slavery. Now, slavery is a very black eye and a stain on American history. And it was such a thing and such a wrong thing for America to do that we ended up fighting a civil war over it. Many Americans lost their lives fighting to end slavery during the Civil War. But of course, that didn't end racism. Racism in this country is still going on. Regardless of what happened during the civil rights movement of the 1960s, with such great civil rights leaders as Martin Luther King Jr. and even Malcolm X. Racism still is around today. But racism is on both sides of the spectrum. Racism isn't just characterized by the color of one's skin. No. Racism is colorblind. Because there are racists on both sides of this argument. There are white racists, there are black racists. And the one thing you have to understand about racism is that if we continue to talk about racism and continue to bring up the color of people's skin time and time again, in essence, by doing that, the real racists come to light. Because one of the things I remember my father telling me or talking to me about racism is the real racists in this country will show you who they are. Because they are the first person to ever bring up race in a conversation. And that is so true. Today, racism is still around. And for the most part, the biggest racists in America are the ones constantly talking about it. You see it in the media. I mean, I could name names, but I don't have to. I don't have to name them. By the words they choose to use, they show you just how racist they are. But the one that I am going to highlight in this show happens to be the President of the United States, Joe Biden. You see, Joe Biden ran on unifying America, regardless of your race, regardless of your skin color, regardless of your gender. He was going to be the great unifier. That's what he ran on. But yet, Joe Biden has done more to divide America during his time as president than any other president. Joe Biden earned the right to be called the commander-in-chief of America. But because of Joe Biden's inability to unite the racists, he has earned another title. Joe Biden is the racist in chief of America, because Joe Biden is the biggest pusher that's dividing this country, and he's using race to do so. And we're going to take a look at exactly what this president, this racist in chief, said when he went to a black college, Howard University, which is a great university, educating many great students, giving them a quality education. He was asked to speak at this university, and his racism came out in full force. He couldn't help but talk about race. But you can't blame Joe Biden for this, because this is what Joe Biden is. Joe Biden is a racist, plain and simple. Joe Biden can't help himself but see race. And by not listening to what Martin Luther King Jr. said in one of his I Have a Dream speech, he cannot look at someone and see their character. No. For Joe Biden, all he sees is race. All he sees is the color of someone's skin, because he is the racist in chief. And we're going to dive into it and expose this racist for what he is. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back, everyone, to the Christian Patriot Report. We are talking about the great racist in chief that is Joe Biden. And now we're going to dive into exactly what did he say when he went to Howard University. Because Joe Biden couldn't help himself. He couldn't help but divide this nation even further in that speech at Howard University. Check this out.
President Biden spoke today about threats to the United States, but they did not include immigration. The president addressed graduating students at Howard University. CBS's Christina Ruffini is at the White House and has more. Christina?
Good evening, Major. President Biden called white supremacy the biggest threat to the homeland, and in his speech to the historically black college, called out some of his predecessors' more incendiary remarks. At Howard University today, President Biden told soon-to-be graduates that America is still in a fight for its soul.
Reject political extremism and reject political violence.
That's the same language Mr. Biden used to launch both presidential runs.
I said we're in a battle for the soul of America.
And without naming names, he reminded the predominantly black audience what his predecessor and current Republican challenger said following violence at a 2017 white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia.
A famous quote. There are very fine people on both sides. That's when I knew I had to stay engaged and get back into public life.
So if you listen to the racist in chief, that is President Joe Biden, white supremacy is the biggest threat to American democracy. Really, Joe? That's what you're going with? White supremacy? You see, Joe Biden's not being 100% honest with the American people, but then again, Joe Biden has a problem telling the truth. I mean, how many lies has this president been caught in? How many lies has he been caught throughout his entire career? It's been a lot. But he can't help himself, you see, because he is, by that speech at Howard University, he showed just how racist he is. Now, he wants to run on his record as being a civil rights leader, as battling for the rights of African Americans. But you also have to remember, Joe Biden doesn't want to tell you the whole truth and nothing but the truth about his past, because many people don't know. He supported segregation as a young senator from Delaware. Yeah. He doesn't want to tell you that, does he? No. He would love for that to go away. But as being reported by NBC News, Joe Biden didn't just compromise with segregationists. He fought for their cause in schools, experts say. Joe Biden helped give America the language that is still used to oppose school segregations today. Legislation and educational history, experts say. You see, Joe Biden was a segregationist. And as a matter of fact, he's one of the last of the segregationists that are still in office today. He supported it. Now, what is segregation? Now, I understand, for those of you that might be watching this show or listening to the show, you may not know what it is. Segregation was the separation of races, the white race and the black race. There was a time in America where if you were a black person, there were certain places you couldn't go. There were certain bathrooms you couldn't use. Certain water fountains you couldn't use. All those things were labeled with white only or black only. And if you were a black, you went to the black only bathrooms and water fountains. You couldn't eat in certain restaurants because certain restaurants wouldn't serve you as being black, just because of the color of your skin. This is what Joe Biden supported. This is the thing that Joe Biden doesn't want the American people to know about. And with that speech at Howard University, Joe Biden proved to the American people he's not a unifier. He's a divider. Because he's hoping that he can stoke the hatred that is racism. He's hoping that he can use that in order to get reelected. Joe Biden said things like this. Check it out.
In Delaware, the largest growth in population is Indian Americans moving from India. You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
Romney wants to he said in the first 100 days, he's going to let the big banks once again write their own rules. Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains. Look, we need to reform the criminal justice to make sure black mothers feel confident when they send their child, their son out on the street that he's going to be safe. We got to recognize that kid wearing a hoodie may very well be the next poet laureate and not a gangbanger. We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids. Wealthy kids, black kids, Asian kids. If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
You see, Joe Biden can't help himself. He just can't. Because most racist people can't help themselves. Racism is a part of their DNA. It is part of their learning. They were taught to be racist. And so we have a racist in chief that's in the White House. The biggest racist in America is Joe Biden. And I know that might sound controversial, but that is the truth. Because you will see who the biggest racists are in this country. Because when they speak, they are constantly bringing up race. They're constantly bringing up the color of someone's skin. That's how they describe people. I don't need to name names of who they are. Their words speak louder than anything that I could say here. Joe Biden's the biggest racist that we probably ever had in the White House. He has a history of supporting segregation throughout his time as a public servant, from his time as a senator. Those things, think about that. Think of the video I just played of the 5 most controversial things that Joe Biden has ever said. Imagine someone like Donald Trump or someone like Ron DeSantis, or you name any other Republican who is white. Imagine they saying something similar to that, or saying the exact same thing. The liberal media in this country would rip them to shreds, calling them a racist. So to Joe Biden, the biggest threat in American democracy today is white supremacy, not Antifa, not the Black Lives Matter. No, it's white supremacy. Now, is white supremacy still a thing in this country? Sure. Is it as strong as it once was? No, it is not. Do you want to know why they're using that term, white supremacy? You see, to Joe Biden and the Democrats, white supremacy is the code word they use to describe Donald Trump supporters. And white supremacy is also what they're going to use to describe Christian voters. You notice they have that term, white Christian nationalism? That came from the Democrats. That came from liberals. That came from the Biden administration. You see, the biggest racists in this country, if you're going to look at party, is the Democrat Party. The very thing that they are telling blacks in this country to beware of, the KKK, the white supremacists, were in fact members of the Democrat Party. They don't want you to know that. Some of the biggest KKK members were Democrats. As a matter of fact, the KKK was created by the Democrat Party. Democrats don't want you to know that. They don't want you to know their racist past. And as a matter of fact, many of them, many Democrats have fought to support and defend. Many of them were lawyers who defended KKK members who were charged of hate crimes. Yet they were able to get them off. And many of them then went on to start things like the Southern Poverty Law Center and many other so-called civil rights movements and organizations. Wake up, America. See the truth as it's staring you straight in the eyes. see Joe Biden as the racist in chief that he is. Joe Biden can run on trying to unify America, but that is the biggest lie of his campaign. Because in his time as a politician, he has done nothing to unify the American people, and he never will. Because he's incapable of doing that. Because he is, in fact, the racist in chief. And with that, we'll be right back after this. If you would like to watch full episodes of the Christian Patriot Report, go check out our Rumble channel. The link to that channel is in the description below.